and I like your background. Looks quite natural. All right, so I am here with River Roberts from Lifetime. River, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having us, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about Lifetime and what you're doing? I just for context, River and I met in Lisbon while I was working with a group called AI Builders, offering a talk on artificial intelligence and natural intelligence. And we uh, we hit it off and decided to look at a collaboration between his work and my work. But River, yeah, you want to tell us about Lifetime? What are you working on?
Well, I mean, I would love to actually get into it, but as per our uh, initial agreement, I'd actually love to kick this off with what I affectionately refer to as a small quiet together, if you
Great,
are into that.
great.
Um,
I'm super into that.
yeah, so let's just start with what are you, 5 to 10 minutes, 8 minutes on the clock? Do you want to?
Sure, sounds great. Um, I'll do a little timer here. So setting the timer for 8 minutes. Do you want to give us any guidance and thoughts, or we're just going to go for it?
I would say the only guidance I'd love to suggest is I think we've both got quite a long-standing practice in meditation, and I'm not sure about you, Andrew, on the daydream side of things, but just coming back to breath and also allowing a little bit of the creative threads to emerge. I think in this particular context, it's an invitation to see what are the natural threads that want to come up in us exploring, collaborating together. So
Fantastic.
I'm really fascinated to see maybe where the initial gender and conversation was going, and then what comes up on the other side of this as a very kind of disruptive way, organic way of coming up with a bit of an agenda and flow for the call.
I couldn't think of a better way to kick it off. So I've got a timer for 8 minutes, and let's go into some beautiful quiet time.
All right.
That's been our 8 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, I can actually see your
Mm.
aura with this with the visual artifact from the background stuff. Very powerful. Such a good way to.
I'm curious what threads came up for you in the small quiet.
Yeah. I just first of all, how precious and important it is to spend that time in small quiet, and how much I wish for everyone in a work and collaboration context and school context, for example, to and relationship context to be able to be comfortable just going into that, because it's that rest. I mean, it's restful, which is quite important, but especially, I mean, it allows all of the extraneous worries um, to rest and settle out. I guess in terms of ideas, I was thinking about, I guess, the difference between bottom up and top down. From you, I know, work very close to nature, like getting your like soil underneath your fingernails, kind of close to nature, and the sort of bottoms up capability of the earth to give rise to life, and how humans, sort of from a top down point of view, have generated a lot of ideas about how we can use this land and what we can make from it and how we can get food and so forth. And my area of focus, Living Code, has been more trying to rehumanize the workplace of tech workers, again reconciling the bottoms up stuff of like what arises naturally in our heart, like what's our natural motivation, inclination, how do we find our honest voice, express that, whatever ideas are rising out of the ground of our minds, and combining that with the top down about, you know, how do we run a project, how do we build a business, how do we structure plans across space and time, and just kind of appreciating the tension between both of those layers. Yeah, what came up for you?
So I kind of tend to fall in a little bit more of a space between meditation and daydreaming, and three things really came through quite strongly. First was kind of like a deep sense of gratitude and reverence for us just being able to kind of create this weird, small, quiet space, and at the same time, actually quite a lot of reverence and gratitude to a friend of mine when I was living in New York who did something called the Big Quiet, Jesse Israel. And it was just, he had such a beautiful format where he invited us all to come and sit for 20 minutes of quiet together in these big kind of mass meditation events. And it wasn't so much about teaching people how to meditate. It was actually just providing space for people to see each other in a moment of silence and be quiet together. And it was just such a beautiful space that kind of emerged from that. So kind of deep reverence and gratitude for Jesse, but also for you to being open to starting something like this with silence and spaciousness in it. The next thing that came through quite strongly was actually feeling quite nervous about this learning in public piece, and not really knowing the way, and figuring a way, just figuring it out as it goes, and a little nervous about saying something awkward or not quite right, and so that energy was quite interesting to sit in for a little bit. And then thirdly, just very excited at the possibilities and the openness that I feel is between us, even though there is some distance. I feel there's some incredible spaciousness and what could emerge between us spending more time together, even if it is digitally at this point. And I think it's a really interesting experiment in how to explore the initial stages of collaborating or co-working in a learning in public scenario. So fascinated to see kind of what emerges off the back of this. And yeah, just broadly speaking, I think what you're exploring with Living Code and what I've started to explore even since our last call with something that we're calling Lifetime, which is a small venture studio focused on building out small tools that help reduce people's screen times and improve people's real-time relationships, like in the actual real world. So I think also very simple, small interventions like what we're practicing now could really be part of that. So I'm fascinated to see kind of what emerges.
And for my benefit and for the benefit of anybody else who's not as familiar, how would you describe a venture studio?
Yeah, sure. So I think we have this idea that a lot of things emerge from kind of a founder or an idea or a scientist, and typically speaking, that initial stage of a new idea is very under-resourced in many ways. So the idea of a venture studio is rather than so venture capital is just providing capital to a new venture, and a venture studio is more about building the framework, the processes, the resources around it, so that each venture can actually have a much higher chance of success or a quicker route to understanding if it's not quite the right fit or not a worthwhile venture to explore right now. So I've been kind of exploring this space for the past 3-4 years, and I'm very excited by what's emerging in and around this space. And I actually think that as a result of venture studios, you end up with actually much healthier organizations that emerge from this, because we're kind of giving birth to these organisms in a sense, these ventures. And if we look back at how governments and large organizations were formed, it's a very different initial kind of seed of how these things emerge. So again, looking at this through maybe the lens of more the natural laws and the principles by which a lot of nature emerged from, I think there's something in this venture studio space that creates more fertile ground for things to emerge.
Really quite lovely. A new friend of mine named Lynn Bieske, I think Bieske. I don't even know how to pronounce her name, but she runs an organization called Hack Nation, and her specialization is kind of like that, basically taking these hackathons, and her thesis is that generally the people who have the skills to build an application don't necessarily have the full portfolio of skills they need to actually build and scale an organization. And I really love your comparison of these sort of nascent startups, and which is nascent startups with living things. And we know that living things, as inconceivably diverse as they are, there are still certain commonalities, right? I mean, they take in resources, they put out waste, they maintain their own boundary. There was Fritjof Capra wrote a book called The Systems View of Life, and he synthesized life and gave it 4 different characteristics. And Living Code, one of the sort of secret meanings of the code, is an acronym also for those 4 characteristics of life. What defines life? That it's cognitive, that there is some process of making sense of the world. And for an organization, you could think of that as like all of the operational processes by which they run, right? By, gathering information and so forth. There's, so cognitive, it's organismic, which means that it defines a clear boundary. So organizations always have a clear inside and an outside. Are you a member of the organization? Are you not? Who's a customer? Who's not? Those boundaries. The D stands for distributed, that there's a network, that all organisms are composed of networks internally and form part of a network. So in an organizational context, that would be the partnerships and customer network relationships, but also the network of work inside that sort of network structure of how you communicate. And then the E is emergent, speaking to that generative property. And so you can never fully predict in advance what a living thing is going to do. And so, yeah, sorry, I easily go abstract on this stuff, but
No, it's a beautiful framework, and thank you for sharing. It's a really worthwhile one, and definitely worth mentioning in this particular context. So, with that being said, I'm curious where you think we should start to explore in terms of collaborating on a potential project or something that wants to emerge here. It feels like there's a few threads that we've already spoken about, both when we first met and our initial call, last week or the week before. I'm wondering if
yes.
anything's been percolating in the background.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we set this up as well, because like you and I both had this sort of vision that this would be a fantastic idea, and I, to be honest, just completely forgot about it until just shortly before the call, and I'm like, right, we're doing this.
Great.
So, um, but I think the whole thesis of like a hackathon, and like a
Mm,
hackathon being the earliest sort of nascent version of what might become a startup, and that would then be incubated by something like your venture studio. It feels like you and I are basically setting ourselves up to do a little mini hackathon here, building in public across these
mhm.
8 sessions that we've scheduled, and I'm super excited about that. Um, uh, I know. I mean, I've got. I know you're running a couple of projects. Like you've got Lovelock for bioinformatics in regional
Mhm.
stuff. I'm yeah, we're with Living Code. We're incubating a few different ideas about a software side of things, and that we had set up some vibe coding together, so that might be fun. But you talked about how to help. So let's imagine that we were building something that would be a portfolio client for lifetime,
Like
that
that.
would fit
Okay.
your thesis of what's some
Sure.
technology that gives small nudges to help people to connect uh, in real life, or to sort of draw out what I call the natural intelligence. And so I'd be
Well, I can
delighted.
certainly give you an example of what we're thinking about so far, as if that would inspire.
Right.
So, like one of the kind of shocking statistics that I think everyone's kind of taking for granted these days is the average human, and this kind of shifts in different parts of the world, but the average human spends 8 hours on a screen each day, between a phone, between a computer, and between TV. That's like half your waking hours. So how can we reclaim some of that, and reconnect people back to the the, the real world, so to speak? And so one of our first I guess products will be launching just in a week is it's called New Year's reservations, and it's the idea of converting your New Year's resolutions into actual reservations for the year ahead. And it's a calendar invite thing that you can share with your loved ones to basically turn a resolution into an action on your calendar that has some accountability, and you kind of pre-book aspects of that. And it's a very simple way to illustrate how we can use technology to actually identify what's important for me in the year ahead, which is, the New Year's is a point of reflection, and it's an important one. And we've gotten kind of in the habit of having these resolutions, and then within a month, those 80% of those kind of die out. So, what's a very simple technological or technology-based intervention that could shift that? And we see that in New Year's reservations, which is actually a concept that I originally heard Tim Ferriss talk about last year. And just throughout this year, I found myself bringing that up in conversation. And everyone that I bring that up with goes like, "Oh, actually, that's kind of interesting. That's kind of cool." And then when I actually push people, like, "Well, what would you make a New Year's reservation on?" Then you actually put it into play. So that could be one example of what we could explore, something to that extent. Another one that I'm exploring right now is this idea of developing personal pilgrimage. What would the word be? I don't know, but helping curate people's personal pilgrimage experiences. Um, there's a guy actually out on the west coast of the States, Stuart Brand, and he was once asked if you could change anything in the world, what would it be? And he came back with turn every tourist into a pilgrim. And so I think in the years ahead, inviting pilgrimage is going to be a super powerful practice. And at the moment, a lot of people just look at pilgrimage as a purely religious thing. And we think there's a possibility to open up pilgrimage to a broader audience and a broader way of thinking. But fundamentally, it's still the same. It's time offline. It's time moving at the speed of your feet, actual walking, both solo and with small groups of people. It's having kind of very simple daily rituals through that process, and giving yourself the time and space to connect with the land that you're on and let your own thoughts kind of catch up with you a little bit. So a really powerful way to create space for reflection. So again, those two as ways to kind of, I guess, earmark what we're exploring at Lifetime, I think could, again, really dovetail quite nicely with how you're thinking about the software layer at Living Code. What does that spark in you?
It's very, both of them very, very thought-provoking. The pilgrimage one in particular, it just occurs to me the mindset that I associate with pilgrimage is humility, right? Like a real deep, that there's something where if somebody goes in Tibet, for example, a lot of folks go on pilgrimage to Mount Kailash, this sort of sacred mountain in Tibet, and sometimes even prostrating, full-length prostration, across hundreds of miles. And there's a sense of humility that you are moving along into a sacred space and along a sacred space. And I was just contrasting that with the mindset of tourists where, it's very easy to come in just wanting to take, food and take pictures and take souvenirs, and take services and so forth. And without such a sense of wanting to be transformed by the experience. As moving as I find both of those ideas, if I'm cautious of the risk of my being distracted. I know, because Living Code, I've wanted to tune it to the workplace and to the workplace of tech workers. But if I take the pilgrimage, I really believe that work can be a process of personal transformation and group transformation. And if we think about the workplace as a place of transformation, like you said, if every tourist could become a pilgrim, what if we were to say every employee becomes you go to work the way you would go to a temple. And I think if I think about the Protestant work ethic, and what that idea brought, was that you can there's this dichotomy between the sacred and the profane that I think it's Max Weber who did this, where the sacred are like, the things that have some sense of holiness. The profane are the activities of daily living, just eating and listening to music and having sex and brushing your teeth and just all the ordinary stuff that you need to do to look after yourself. And normally, in Europe, for example, you'd have your cathedrals and churches and so forth. And then you'd have your taverns and regular life, and you'd be in the marketplace and so forth. And that's a very separate activity from going to church. But the idea of the Protestant work ethic is, what if setting up a taco stand, which I believe is one of the most virtuous endeavors, because the world really needs tacos. What if setting up a taco stand is your act of service to humanity, right? Like all these hungry by. What if this is a spiritual act, a spiritual deed, right? What if cleaning the house is a spiritual act? What if writing software is a spiritual act? What if, Toyota's idea is, they're enabling mobility for people. And so I really want to see work as a spiritual act, like if every employee was on a path of spiritual transformation at work, which really, not to force anybody into any religion, again, like you were saying about pilgrimage, but to say, let's start with humility, Let's start with personal
Mm.
transformation. How would we like to be transformed? How would the people around us like to be transformed? What contribution would we like?
Mm.
Our, one short precious life.
That definitely sparks a few things in me. One of the things that has been recurring over the last couple of years is this idea of neighborhoods and livelihoods. And I actually don't think people want jobs. People want a livelihood, something that enlivens them to get up in the morning and to be of service. And then also neighborhoods is this kind of like forgotten layer in which we can actually be of service. And particularly with potentially what's around the curve with AI, kind of middling out a lot of the global intellectual white collar jobs. I think it's a really beautiful invitation to connect back with the local, with the neighborhood. Like, what can you do to be of service to the 100 or the 1,000 people around you, and really be in service and like almost more physically. So I know that you're maybe thinking of this from more of a corporate perspective, so like the big organizations. And what that sparks in me immediately is more of the smaller scale stuff. And I I'm in Thailand right now, and I do spend quite a lot of time in Asia. And I think that this is still what a lot of Asian cultures still have, in really healthy balance. A lot of the economic activity or a lot of the livelihoods are actually really created, for communities within the 100 or 1,000 people around. In fact, I was just I'm in Thailand, and I feel fortunate enough to be able to go for a massage pretty much every day. And it's incredible the kind of community and the culture around the massage culture here. And a lot of it is people being of service in a really beautiful way. And it struck me that again, like it's just a very simple, kind of work or job, you could say, but there's a way in which you can approach that through more of that sacred and service based aspect, as opposed to I'm just doing it to cover the bills.
What happens when you work in a large corporation, especially digitally, and you never meet your customers is one thing. And
Mhm.
when you know if I think about, we started out talking about people being on the screen all the time. If you're on the screen all the time, I mean, the screens are amazing, absolutely miraculous, but you're missing, 3D. You're missing the depth and dimension of life. You're missing moving your body, for example. There's a whole layers that are just stripped out of your life. And if you're doing a job, but you don't actually have an emotional connection with the people that you're serving and the people who are serving you, and you're not able to feel on a human level that interaction, it's really easy to get off base because you're missing this most critical feedback loop, right? Of like, was that helpful or
Mm.
not? How did you feel about that?
Mhm.
And like, if the Thai masseuse is going too hard, their elbows driving into you can give them feedback, or if it's too soft, you can give them feedback, or if it really worked well, you can give them gratitude, and that's
Mm.
how we've evolved, right? We've evolved to have that human layer, the emotional layer, and you really lose that at scale. It's so easy to lose that, when things scale up, and then when you lose that, you just made such bad decisions, right? Like you build software nobody can use, like you build products that destroy the earth. So yeah. So anyway, so let's think about the workplace, and ideally, hopefully, it's either in real life or somehow humanizing the feedback. Maybe humanizing the feedback, closing the loop,
Mm.
between who you're working with, and working for.
I think that's a really worthwhile insight, like understanding the loops, the feedback loops, and it's also something that technology can, like very simply add visibility to and create these kind of self-recursive improvement loops as well. Interesting. Um, is there like a certain scale that you feel is worth starting with, or maybe like like who would the ideal first custom would be in your mind?
Well, I mean, for Living Code specifically, I've been thinking of it scoped mostly at the level of managers and directors and and the immediate like small groups. There's an idea
Mm.
there's an idea in learning theory that there's an ideal learning unit, which is 3 to 5 people. Like if you can get a group of 3 to 5
Yeah.
people, there's enough people. It's small enough that you can get the group to learn together, but it's big enough that you can sort of reinforce the social behavioral patterns. And so I was thinking a lot about how to support, how to help create team flow, like a sense of shared team aspiration, and kind of align
Mhm.
team's vision, because the communication can be so poor, I think, especially in these technical teams where often people don't have, they're not sometimes the visionary, the honest emotional communication component and the visioning component can be a bit anemic in these teams, these environments. And so
Yeah, totally. I mean, what I kind of see a lot of is both simultaneously over communication and under communication, in the sense that it's really hard to determine the signal from the noise. There's a lot of consistent, particularly in these asynchronous working groups, there's a lot of like small bits, but not necessarily through the affected medium to make worthwhile decisions. And again, it's something that it feels like the tooling that we have available now could really solve for this quite simply. I think this working group kind of 3 to 5 people is a really exciting space. And in fact, I even just spoke with Luke from AI Builders yesterday and Arthur about putting together a working group for AI builders specifically. Basically a 6-week working group, inviting a bunch of AI builders to form these kind of 3 to 5 person working group things, commit to 6 weeks of 90-minute calls, so a little bit like what we're doing now, and having an agent join the calls to auto summarize the insights that emerge from that, and maybe help guide the talking agenda for the next meeting. So you end up with this quite fluid process of the different perspectives coming together, discussing different things, understanding an effective facilitation framework, and then that being contributed to. And we're also looking at this through the beneficial general intelligence framework. So how do we support more emergence of beneficial general intelligence frameworks as opposed to purely economic, extractive, consumption-based models and agents and products? So I think the working group thing could be really, really incredible.
yeah, I thought, I mean, I love the idea of, I mean, from a technological point of view, having an agent join the call and just being in the background, right? But being available to make a few nudges. So imagine, I've thought sometimes about this like video, these AI note takers, like you join the meeting, I join the meeting, and then my AI note taker joins the meeting, right? And they don't really, they're kind of there unobtrusively. You're meant to forget that they exist. But they could be giving some simplifications, summarizations of the meeting for everybody, and then some nudges as well. Like, hey, why don't you ask River, hey, Andrew, like a little thing pops up. Hey, Andrew, you've been thinking about this, this manager coaching app. Why don't you mention to River about the manager coaching app, right? Like augmenting my memory and augmenting my courage, actually, because I think some of it, a lot of it's a courage. I really do feel like there's a culture of intimidation in these meetings, in most company cultures, because it's so performative. Everybody's, I think even more increasingly now with AI, everybody's concerned about losing their jobs to AI, and it's just increasing all this social anxiety. And that really degrades the quality of communication. And it feels like a lot of it is just easing the fear around the whole thing and creating some shared
Agreed.
vision.
Yeah. I mean, perhaps even having the AI agent steer the meeting could be insightful. But also, what's coming up is the link I actually just shared with you before our call around this idea of working with me frameworks, and I think I shared with you the manual of me site. So the invitation is for every individual to go through a process to better understand how they best work, and then have this kind of it's been a bit of a trend over the past couple of years, but this working with me. So manual of me is one example of this, but there's a whole bunch of templates you can find online around this idea of working with me, and asking questions on like when is the best time to communicate, what are the best mediums to communicate with, what are the tools that I'm proficient in using, et cetera, et cetera. What is my long-term vision or outlook type thing. And so maybe having an initial framework that invites everyone to at least have a better understanding of that. Any kind of meeting agent has much broader context, so that you can actually have pretty incredible alignment as things emerge. So there's a bit more context, and these agents are being able to hold more and more context. So I think, if we're looking 3-6 months down the line, it can be a really powerful tool for helping small groups align and be very efficient with communication and decision making. Feels like a really worthwhile tool to explore building out.
Yeah, I agree. And Luke and I both spent a while studying liberating structures. I'm not sure if you bumped into those, but he and I actually had discussed the idea of having an AI app that structures these meetings, basically creates a little bit of the structure around the meeting. So imagine that you and I get sent out into breakout rooms where we're talking to an agent temporarily, just to sort of do or either we're in a quiet space where we can just gather our own thoughts for a little bit. And then maybe we share those thoughts to an agent or whatever. And then there's a bit of coalescing of those ideas and sharing of those ideas. And then we come back together and are offered like an aggregate, summarized sense of what it is that the group came up with. Obviously, we'd have to be careful to make sure that everybody felt comfortable being really honest and creative with it. But making sure that the AI was not doing the thinking for people, but it was helping with some of the summarization of the thinking and giving people a voice, giving a voice to ideas that might otherwise not, where people might not have courage.
Yeah, this is brilliant. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the work of Audrey Tang and what's kind of emerged in the Taiwanese governance space, but they have a platform called Polis, Polis. And also another platform called GovZero, and they're just doing some incredible work around collective sense making and consensus, and maybe there's aspects of that could inform this particular piece on these much smaller scales. What do you think would be, in terms of realistic over the next 8 weeks? What do you think would be realistic in terms of vibe coding, something that we could share by the last call?
So I'm just bringing up our notes doc so we can maybe record some proposal for the idea. I would like to believe, from what I've seen be possible, that we might actually be able to build something like that would actually do a bit of the choreography of group meetings. I'd certainly be willing to give it a try. It feels ambitious, but I feel like some of these new tools make the ambitious possible. So I'd certainly be
possible. Yeah.
If we wanted to give a shot. I mean, worst thing that happens is it doesn't succeed, or we get partway through, or we realize it's a bad idea. But I think that's the whole point, right? To learn.
Yeah, well, definitely. Let's look at how we can maybe validate the idea before we build it, in terms of like what is the bit we're actually solving for here, and is this something that small groups would value and potentially kind of pay for, I guess. And maybe there's a test group we can kind of build this around. Again, there may be the possibility to do this with AI builders and a collaboration there. I'm happy to share with you the proposal that Luke and I are exploring.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm certainly happy for us to use the AI builders group to validate, to test this out. And then, so again, the framework that they had suggested there is 6 90-minute sessions. And is it to build a particular app? Is it kind of a hackathon style thing for those groups?
No,
or?
so the idea is more just kind of working groups around certain themes pertaining to beneficial general intelligence. So it's less about maybe producing a prototype or an outcome, but more like what are the challenges they're coming up against, what are the resources that they're exploring, and just tracking their progress. So it's less focused necessarily on an outcome. That's not to say something could be developed and produced, and maybe through this process, we could actually put little bounties out that kind of encourage and invite the builders to solve for various aspects of this. Again, I'll share with you the proposal so you can have a bit of a read through, but it's still like we're still defining it, so there's no reason we couldn't kind of update it to embed this to be a little bit more active. But it does seem like a powerful thing that could help a lot of different groups. I'm not sure if you had a chance to read much of Riane Eisler in the past as well, but she has a really beautiful book that focuses, actually, I think she's got a foundation called Partnerism. And her whole piece is, if you can better understand the unit function of cooperation, and her piece is, it starts in a partnership. So it could be a romantic partnership, it could be a family partnership. Any group of 2 people or more is a partnership. And if you can better understand how the relationships within that system work well, then you end up with much better outcomes for everyone involved. So I often think that thinking in terms of what makes for a healthy partnership and a symbiotic relationship is a really good point to maybe ground this particular product in kind of. And again, this is how nature works. Resiliency in nature works when you have a really well balanced, diverse set of inputs and outputs. A healthy forestry ecosystem is when you have lots of different species contributing to the whole system, as opposed to 1, 2, or 3 that are really taking over and thriving.
Is this the same Riane Eisler who did like the Chalice and the Blade back in the 90s?
It is.
Women's
it is, yeah.
I don't think I've got the name spelled. Interesting. I didn't realize that she was doing that kind of stuff as well. So that's you're expanding my mental space a lot. I mean, we could certainly create. So what if we created an app that was configurable to guide groups through different processes? So for example, even this, like creating an app that guides you through the ideation process. Imagine you could use this for for lifetime, like to draw out from people this innovative creative process, thinking through the practicalities of building a business, would be one possible structure. But basically, an app that gives timers, prompts, like a well choreographed workshop. It's largely just the art of timekeeping, right? Creating like provocative questions and good timekeeping. So what if we were to build something that could facilitate that?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, what's coming up for me is when you're talking about this is like, if we just go back to first principles, why do groups even meet? Like, what is the underlying kind of first principle of why small groups meet and decide to work together? I think that if maybe we could break that into a handful of categories and then solve for improving aspects of that, even just I don't know the answer. I mean, I would make an assumption that at least these days small groups meet to make money. However, that doesn't feel particularly sacred and not necessarily in line with maybe the mission of both Lifetime and Living Code. But for sure, there's something more fundamental underneath all of that, even if the superficial layer is we're meeting to make money.
And meeting to make money is certainly maybe the case when you have a small group forming a startup. But when you're an established corporation and you've got a team that's moving and they're like responsible for, SRE for a certain company, they're not directly meeting about making money. They're directly meeting about, increasing uptime on the services, or how do we address backup issues or something like that. They're solving some problem where it's one of the luxuries of being in a large corporation.
Yeah, so solving a problem for sure.
Solving a problem, right? So it's and the problem might be we're not making any money, right? So so why do groups even meet? Is solving a problem that can't be solved alone. How about that?
Alone, yeah. No, that's really great. And also, like, there still seems to be even just a lot of space in helping people think through their problems from a first principles perspective. Again, you look at some of the greatest engineering minds right now, and it seems that one of the breakthrough, at least thought processes, is their ability to go back to first principles. And again, it seems that the AI tools that we have right now would make it very easy for small groups to come back, consider first principles, and from that place make pretty informed decisions together on what to move forward on and what to prioritize.
Yeah. So
right. This is shaping up.
Yeah. To drive people to clarify what is the problem they're trying to solve.
Well, again, I also think that groups meet fundamentally from a first principles perspective to make decisions together. There's kind of like collective sense making, and then to make decisions together. So Daniel Schmachtenberg has been doing some great work on collective sense making over the past few years, and then it's like what's been actually informing the decision making process. Again, I'm so surprised at how much kind of noise there is around group meetings, when in reality it's like, all right, we're in the space and time together. What decisions can we make together to move something forward? Even if that decision needs to be changed at a later date, let's really focus around what decisions need to be made.
I've got one that would be, here's $1 billion idea. Something that makes meetings shorter on average by 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that. If we could, like, if the groups are meeting, if groups are meeting to consume time, that's one purpose, right? If groups are meeting to come to shared decision, that's another purpose. I spent a lot of time in company meetings where they were scheduled for 30 minutes, so we took 30 minutes, or they're scheduled for 90 minutes, so we took that 90 minutes, and but if you really are just driving towards making decisions, then can we give people time back?
Yeah, I think that's an incredible frame for this as well, and it's very, very tangible. It certainly lines up with both Living Code and Lifetime. So when you say that, I'm like, do we go for the 8-minute meeting, or do we go for like the 15-minute meeting, or the 30-minute meeting? Like what kind of frame? And there's no reason we couldn't do all of those formats and kind of test out what kind of works. But knowing that if you select the amount of people in the working group, maybe the decisions that need to be made, then it kind of allocates like the efficient time piece, and then the agent acts as more of the facilitator, moves people on when they're rambling. So maybe people don't take it as personally when they're being moved on, or kind of in conversation by an AI.
It gradually reduces their volume, like it just starts fading them out.
Fade out.
The screen starts fading to black, and the voice starts trailing off, and then everybody just moves on with the meeting. So I feel like
Oh man,
there's something
talk
rich
about
here.
coaching. I feel
Yeah,
like
I
we
mean,
need the what is the theme music to the Golden Globes or something as well, when they fade out the acceptance speeches.
I, I don't know that, but yeah, there feels like there's something rich here. So, in the spirit of giving people time back and not running meetings too long, this feels super rich and creative. Do you feel like we've got enough notes um, to have given? Do you think we have enough here to give our future selves of next week the clues they need to build this thing?
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say maybe we could divide and conquer a little bit. I'm happy to kind of dive in on the research side of things and start to think through kind of design positioning, and see if there's a little bit more that we could figure out in terms of product market fit. And then maybe if you want to focus a little bit more on the dev side of things and figuring out what might some initial tooling might be around this.
All right. So. Uh,
I unfortunately can't even write. I unfortunately can't even run anti-gravity on my tablet, which I'm already stretching right now with its capacity.
You're traveling light. So uh, I'm wondering, uh, did you just assign us homework outside of the next meeting? Um,
Well, I don't know, Eve, but I'm definitely interested in putting at least an hour into doing a bit of background research and stuff. I'm not expecting. I don't think it historically in the past these 8 hour things have really just been let's work within the 8 hour kind of
uh-huh.
time slot. But having said that, I get excited by certain things and feel like it is worth maybe putting a little bit of time in that aside.
You're obviously bringing a lifetime's worth of research to this already, and by all means, you get as smart as you want in between now and the next week. So if you want to get smarter in the next week, then and bring that smarter person to the meeting, that's fantastic. What did you ask me to do? So you said product market fit for yourself, and
Well, so I typically like to like my sweet spot. Again, I guess this is working with me. In fact, maybe what we could do is we could both individually do a working with me template and kind of share that next time as well, because I think that would be a really good way of maybe better understanding our strengths and weaknesses and seeing how we could even find alignment as our small working group. So we could actually put ourselves into the test bed of what
great,
we're building here. How's that sound?
great, yeah. Okay, anything else you want me to do?
I was going to say look at initial kind of dev stack around this, but I don't think that's necessary at this point. Let's.
I would benefit from spending some time on anti-gravity, so
Okay.
I'll on that.
Yeah. I'm not sure what your kind of learning process with different tools is, but I've found that using the AIs to understand the tools at times can be very effective. And then other times actually just going onto YouTube and seeing what other people are posting in terms of going deep on a certain tool has been super helpful in learning quite quickly. So
Nice. Well, that'll be a very fun way for me to spend some of the next week. River, this is a joy. I'll send the recording link over to you, and we can post this on our respective platforms. Fun idea.
yo, exciting.
Yeah. All right, bud. See you next week. Enjoy
Well,
Thailand,
thanks for your time.
of course.
See you next week.
Bye.
So I have one little thing to end with. Maybe over the course of these 8 hours, we can get the last meeting down to 8 minutes.
But we want the last meeting to be choreographed by the app.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Even better. Done.
Awesome. See you
Ciao.
soon.
Lots of love. Have a great weekend. Ciao.